Well, as we're sort of dealing with some logistics, should we just take a moment to read through the results of our survey?
I'm sorry, Matt, what did you say?
Just take a moment to read through the results, the survey results from
Okay.
continuous improvement questions or prompts or statements.
Thank you.
Someone tell me what ADS stands for.
Accreditation data system.
Yes.
Where people put in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
EDS might also mean and no, I'm taking that back. Sorry.
No, you've not.
It's the fever talking. Sorry.
You've already said it once.
Assessment design standards. That's what I was reaching for. ADS. Thank you. I'm not sure what the context is, so keep going.
With respect to context, maybe it would help us to understand the title of our group is Program Continuous Improvement, and we should decide, is it that we're trying to improve the ways in which the performance assessment is used for continuous improvement? Is that what we're trying to make recommendations towards?
I believe so. That's part of the charge. On the top of the first page, the second sentence, the objective is to ensure these assessments are embedded in preparation and contribute to program improvement through the accreditation system.
Okay.
Where did you find that?
The second sentence in our charge.
I also have a question. Is continuous improvement tied to a particular standard in the accreditation process?
Yeah, common standard 4.
Or it's actually about continuous
It's actually about, I know, I was actually thinking, I wanted to.
the words continuous.
Yeah, it does. I wanted to pull up that language.
Okay. That's important. I have no idea.
Yeah, let's.
Accreditation standards.
And I think it's important. Now, this didn't get brought up in the other meeting room, but accreditation is more than just TPA scores.
Absolutely.
Just so we have a shared understanding. There's a lot more that goes on there. I don't know if that was obvious in some of the statements or comments that people were making.
No, I think that's a good point, Matt.
Let me I have it, it's coming up, I need to restart my computer, of course, that's the thing right now. So it just takes me a.
I think it would help for us to quickly look at standard 4 under the common standards, at least just the summary that's listed on the commission page.
Yeah, I was actually gonna copy and paste it into this document.
Yeah, I'll do it.
It's very short,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. Oh, and thank you for making it bigger.
Hey, I need that.
Yeah, me too.
I know that's what I was trying to figure out, how to share the link, but. If you Google CTC Common Standards, you get there.
Thank you.
I have it finally.
You got it.
Now too.
I mean, those of you that know about this more than I do, which is everyone probably, that's an overview of that standard. Are there specific things within that standard mentioned?
No, because the common standards apply to the entire educational unit.
Right.
So it's just this general standard that all programs are supposed to be involved in.
So if
Sorry,
we-
I should have let Cheryl answer that.
So if we added the TPA, I mean, a lot of the suggestions are so specific about the
Yeah, you're right.
TPA. But it's not specific about anything else within
You're right.
the unit
Yep,
or
right, because it applies to.
the
all-
unit or the program,
Yep,
right? But we're deciding that, I mean, it seems that we're being asked to say, well, we're going to call out the TPA. It's something that's so special, it's going to be mentioned over and above
yep, you're right.
the others.
So does that? I kind of was grappling with this a little bit actually in making the recommendations. It made me wonder if. Should there be something included within the program standards that refers explicitly to programs engaging in continuous improvement with program-specific data, such as TPA?
I think that's right, Juliet. I think we're looking at not just the common standards, but program standards too, to see whether there are improvements that should be made, as well as in the accreditation system.
Someone recommended program standard 5A. I'm not, well, enough versed in these to know them by number.
So I was looking at the recommendations, and I sort of saw 3 different buckets for them, and you all tell me if this makes sense. Some of the recommendations are how to ensure that teacher educators know the assessment. Some of them are about how to ensure the TPA data is used for continuous improvement. And some of them are about how accreditation flags programs that need improvement.
And to add, it seems like, I don't know, Tina, if you would agree, it seems like based on the survey results, most of the support is for that second bucket you described.
Okay.
Can you name that second bucket one more time? I just want to get notes down.
Second one, how to ensure the TPA data is used for continuous improvement.
So it's 5A4. It says the program maintains program level and candidate level TPA data, including but not limited to individual and aggregate results of candidate performance over time. The program documents the use of these data for commission reporting, accreditation, and program improvement purposes.
Mhm.
So that's where it gets specific.
It gets
Yeah.
specific there.
There.
That's as specific as it gets.
Okay.
So if you
Yeah.
need something else.
So that's a lot of what.
Well, it says you have to maintain it. But it never says you have to do anything with it.
Right.
That's
Right.
Good call.
That's why, that was mine, the 1.4, the second one there.
And does it call out, I mean, one of the things we've talked a lot about and has come up in virtual meetings is the disproportionality of passing rates with different groups of candidates. Does it point directly to analysing data in terms of?
No, it doesn't. That's where we would need to be specific about that.
Okay, right, yeah, then that's definitely something that we should be
Yes, yeah.
recommending that
Okay, let me get mine.
that's actually a requirement.
Is that where we want to start?
Yeah, what's the requirement? What are you proposing?
That it isn't just analyse your data and leave it there. We need to be really pointing in the areas of data that this group's been concerned about, which is the disproportionality of passing rates.
Right. But is that? So. Is that a result of the fact that the TPA itself is biased? I mean, are you just uncovering what's already exists?
Yeah.
So what would we learn, I guess, from doing that, other than? Because it seems like in looking at some of the data earlier, there's in the Cal TPA or two of the TPAs, the Black and African American teacher candidates were disproportionately failing on the first pass, which seems to suggest that there's some bias in the TPA there.
Absolutely.
So if we were to disaggregate this, if programs were to disaggregate it, they might just uncover what we already know, which is that the TPA isn't perfect. I guess.
Yeah.
Process, I guess, in what we're suggesting.
But that's what I think that I think you were intimating is that there isn't a call to action. You know, because that's also something that they need to have. And, you know, so if you're getting the data and responding to, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, and you know, they've got to have a plan to respond to it.
Right, and that's, yeah,
But,
so that they're engaging in authentic
Yeah.
continuous improvement, right?
But
You're
how-
analyzing the data, you're creating a plan to
And-
address whatever.
and you have to do that as part of the accreditation process, don't you? When you've knocked an area, they expect you to come up with a plan within a year or something.
Right, if you have a stipulation.
If you have a stipulation, so it would be something along those lines that I think we could expect to come out of that. Otherwise, it becomes the response that we got from NTPA and Cal TPA when we brought this up was, yeah, we know. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, we know. You know, they have to do something about it, you know, but that's as far as it went.
Well, I wonder if there's a way of focusing on we in other focus areas that we're working on the design of the instrument to improve, hopefully, bias issues. And that is something that goes hand in hand with what we're focusing on here today, which is, let's say we can design a performance assessment that we are comfortable is addressing some of those concerns. Now, how are programs going to use that assessment for their continuous improvement purposes? And how is CTC going to use the accreditation process to ensure that they're doing so?
Exactly. It's not like there's a single point of bias. Yeah, I agree. So,
It's something that that I was thinking about as we walked in, actually, about that whole process of we're asking the accreditation to take account quite deeply because it's being pulled out compared to some of the other things, like, coursework grades and other things aren't in there like that. And yet, at the same time, we're saying that this is actually a problematic assessment in the first place, which is why we've got a working group. We have a working group because there's a problem with the assessment, but at the same time, we're saying the assessment needs to be within the accreditation process.
We do, but I think we also are not just looking at potential problems with the assessment. We're looking at the ways in which the assessment gets embedded in programs and the supports that candidates get for doing it, and that's problematic as well. And that's, I think, where this focus area 3 is focused on.
Well, I think it's part of how are we then making sure programs are providing those supports
Yes.
or
Right.
ways
Right.
that.
Which is in the other room, isn't it? I think that,
Yeah,
yeah,
great.
there's another room looking at that.
About how the.
Candidate support.
Right.
Yeah.
And so our charge is really about how do the TPA data get used to support continuous improvement.
As well as how do we ensure that teacher educators know the assessment and the rubrics and the process and everything else so that they are supporting candidates well.
Yeah.
I mean, we recently had an accreditation last year, maybe, last year. And one of the questions that they asked me as the TPA coordinator is those very things. Can you take us through the process of support? Can you tell us how candidates get to find out about X, Y, and Z? So that is part of, but is it really in the standards, or is that just what the accreditation visitors want to look at?
Well, Standard 5 says the program requires program faculty, including full-time, adjunct, and other individuals providing instructional and/or supervisory services to candidates within the program to become knowledgeable about the TPA tasks,
Right.
rubrics, and scoring, as well as how the TPA is implemented within the program so that they can appropriately prepare candidates for the assessment and also use TPA data for program improvement purposes.
And that's already there.
Mhm.
Yes, it is.
Well, we don't have to change anything, do we? I didn't know it was already written like that, so.
I think part of the challenge is that every institution is going to tell you that they support their candidates.
Right.
How do you parcel that out when it's really truly happening deeply versus when it's either superficial and not really happening consistently? And I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
And they're going to, I can tell you, the documentation you'll see will show that they're supporting candidates.
Yep.
But the words that you're hearing from candidates are, I'm not being supported. And so that's the only thing that so I guess the question is, can the standard be changed, or is there some other way to figure that out? Because that's a hard thing to get your arms around.
Right.
Be quiet.
No, I think that's very helpful, Cheryl. It is Cheryl, right? Cheryl, you're in the room. I can't see you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe one thing we could do is look at each of the brainstorm ideas and see if we understand what people are requesting and maybe see what bucket it falls under.
Yeah.
And also see whether it's already in the standards or not.
I hadn't looked at the standards, so I'm thinking some people who wrote these don't know what was exactly in the standard when they were writing this in the first place.
Yep.
Right. And that's where Cheryl can help us. Would that be a process you all would be comfortable with, is going through each of the recommendations, looking at that?
Yes.
Okay. So if we look at the first one,
That's online.
Agreed, which preparation programs chosen to be supported and embedded in.
So I think that
Oh, I was looking at them on
This list.
no, the continuous improvement list.
Yeah, the continuous improvement list. So the first one is credential programs should specifically review disaggregated data concerning pass, no pass rates for the TPA in order to create improvement plans for embedded TPA support.
So that's continuous improvement.
Yeah,
Sorry.
under the program continuous improvement
Yeah.
table part A.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to consolidate these recommendations or these brainstorms into
The recommendations.
recommendations. Yeah.
And that's the one where, I mean, I think that's a really important one to state. And we could add in terms of disproportionate pass rates or something that, you know, the groups of students bit that we've been concerned about. Because review disaggregated data, that can mean all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Right.
And for example, in my own institution, we some time ago we had disproportionality with our world languages, which I know in England actually is the same for everybody doing NTPA.
Right.
But we immediately then come up with a plan to say, well, what are we going to do to make sure that our world languages aren't failing at a higher rate than other people?
So it's disaggregating it by demographic, disaggregating it by pathway. Because we had, like, within ours, we've been looking at it with people in residencies, people who are interns, people in the traditional path. Are there differences in how they're doing?
Right.
Graphics.
I think that's really important.
Okay.
As we've seen in the data, we see intern program candidates are not performing as well as candidates in other program pathways.
Yeah, but I think it also depends on the model.
So I think it's a very good idea to maybe make some specific suggestions to what kind of disaggregation there should be. Programs look at.
By demographics.
I think too, now this is just looking at pass versus no pass rates. What about individual rubric areas?
Yeah, definitely.
can we just hedge it a little bit by saying disaggregate data at least by
Yeah.
program to leave people the option to explore other.
Yes.
Can we do it in a way where programs can then create their own subgroups according to their programmatic needs? Because I wouldn't be able to tell you what institutions have different subgroups, like you just
Right.
mentioned, like intern, and so that would be like the same thing in terms of choice, right? Letting them disaggregate data, but in a way that they can create or they can show their data through their subgroups, whatever that might be.
Mhm. I think that's really important, Talia, because while we have data, statewide data for pathways, those pathways at this moment primarily concern intern, traditional, and emergency credential candidates where TPA doesn't apply. But programs will identify different pathways within their own institutions based on how they've designed those pathways.
Student demographics.
I also like your idea, Tina, of pushing people to disaggregate by the actual tasks or the rubrics or whatever else, whatever it is that which pieces that students should be able to answer okay, we're really not doing assessment that well, and that's why next year we're going to be rewriting our assessment programs.
Exactly.
Or that sort of thing that is what, and I imagine that most institutions are doing something like that, whether all or not, I don't know, but.
Well, Cheryl, what are you seeing?
Usually the data we've seen do what you just said. They lump either all their student teaching models and they have various pathways for that, or the intern. And sometimes we're even seeing them forget pathways that they have. So it's like the SB 488, the new literacy certification process, we said you must identify all of your pathways and the coursework. And it's amazing to me to see how many variations there are at institutions right now. So I think that's a great suggestion, is to really force them, list all of your pathways and look at your data based on those pathways. Now, the numbers might get small in some of those pathways, but still,
Right.
I mean, if they can't get so small that they could identify individual students, but most people would know that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I also I wonder if we should identify what we mean by data. Are we just talking about scores that faculty see on a piece of paper, or are we requiring them to look at actual candidate work?
Could it be both?
But do they have access to it necessarily?
So
Mhm.
as of right now, if I understand correctly, Cheryl, add on to this if you have more information. It's something that is frequently asked for, is for programs to be given their disaggregated data from TPA scores generally. Apparently, it is possible for programs to go into the results analyzer environment, but they then have to download a data set and match it to their own candidates, I believe. So it's quite cumbersome.
It's not.
It's not?
It's very easy,
Oh, yeah, good.
very easy.
Others have told us it's difficult, so.
I mean, I have it easy because it's a one single unit.
I'm
group
desperate
of-
to know
group
this, so
of
I do
candidates.
want to know your experience, because this is part of where we're looking at expanding the data that we do. So I'm wondering, is this something we are tasking programs to do? Or are we providing this, and at least in some form, and asking what they're doing with it?
So I am a firm believer that if a program is going to improve, they need to look at what the actual candidates are doing in their work, what they're saying, what they're seeing, what assessments they're using in their classrooms, what their lesson plans are looking like, who they're including in those. That numbers are one thing that can point you to where there might be problems, but then you need to dig deeper and look at what specifically is happening.
So Tina, I just added programs disaggregate data, but it's not really disaggregating that data, the student work. It's analyzing student work, right?
Yeah, I think it's using disaggregated data to identify areas of strength and areas where there's problems, and then digging deeper and looking at actual candidate work to understand, why is this an area of strength? What are they doing? And looking at the problems and understand, why is this a problem? What are they doing?
Do we replace problem with areas for development?
Areas for growth, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
A heads up that we have 20 minutes left, 20 to 4.
What a good timekeeper you are.
Oh, well, that's one recommendation. It's a juicy recommendation.
It's a juicy recommendation.
It is, but Matt, maybe when we look at some of the other brainstorms, we'll say, oh, we already covered that. You got that one.
It's pretty repetitive down here of some of the things.
Some of it, yeah, exactly.
Areas for growth. And so Tina, you said things so well and I didn't capture it. Okay, and then, because then it's, once we've identified the areas for growth, then we wanna.
Yeah, after they diagnose areas for growth, then they complement that information with.
Yeah,
Looking at actual candidate.
It will
Areas.
triangulate the data.
growth. Program engage.
All those MA projects coming.
And I think that not the end. I suppose it's the end piece is that if I was coming in to observe as an accreditation person, I would then say, well, show me your plan and but what you're going to do. So I would expect to see the plan, not them go away and say, oh, we haven't got a plan yet. You know, if you haven't got a plan because you told them as a visitor, use the plan, they should have a plan because they've already done the groundwork for the past 2 or 3 years. This has been a consistent problem. This is what we're now doing with it. It wasn't a one-off, 1 year thing. We can see it year after year, and this is our plan to do that.
I keep coming back to.
Surveys, student interviews, exit surveys.
I would say, Juliet, both for areas of strength and for areas of growth,
Yeah.
candidates should look at. I mean, programs should look at candidate work.
Student teaching evaluation.
Well, I just want my computer to respond. I'm like, I wish I could just take it.
It's so laggy.
It was so lagging and I just need to take the time to restart it, but. Investigation analysis of student work. Exit surveys.
It looks like it's recording it. If you just keep typing.
Student
That's pretty
interviews.
good.
There we go. Etc. To better understand. Or to create a plan. A plan.
That's the aim.
I keep coming back to, Fresno State, Cheryl knows this very well. We concurrently had CCTC accreditation with AQUIP accreditations, a national accrediting body that's totally built on a continuous improvement framework, where this is what we had to do.
Mhm.
For their standards, we had to identify data sources from multiple perspectives, student data, faculty, external stakeholders. We had to then analyze the data, figure out what it was saying, and then create a plan for how we were going to respond.
Hmm.
And both qualitative and quantitative data, could be scores, could be surveys.
Yeah, I think though that one thing that might be missing in the standards is a requirement to look at actual candidate work. I think particularly in large programs that some of what happens is programs are looking at numbers.
I think you're right.
Is that what you're seeing, Cheryl?
I think that's probably the case in the larger programs, yeah.
What's it?
I mean, you might ask those institutions what they do, but yeah, that's what I think so.
So we we can have specific things here. Do we just want to just zoom out a little bit and analyze qualitative and quantitative work?
Yeah.
Hypothetically say exit surveys, student interviews.
Or should this say qualitative and qualitative work?
I was just sorry,
Or we might even say if we're just focused on the TPA first, do an analysis of student work. And then the second part to that for the continuous improvement plan, I think, Matt, you suggested triangulating with other data sources that programs have access to, such as exit surveys. Let's dig deeper. Let's understand what the surveys are saying and interviews are saying.
So is it findings should be triangulated?
Mm-hmm.
Related with other sources of data, such as
Mm-hmm. Program assessments. I think that's one of the big problems with accreditation is programs will say, well, in our course assignments, our candidates are doing just fine, but they're not passing the TPA. So what is the disconnect?
And then, Juliet, I think, I don't remember if it was Colin who had said in that second part about developing a plan for like improvement, right? So like it's obvious, or I don't know, sort of there that the point of looking at the data is to then develop the plan. Yeah, I think there,
A plan for improvement or an improvement plan?
something like that. Yeah, I don't remember what it was exactly, but it was one of those.
That capture it, Colin?
I think so. And it also, in my institution, when we do this, one of the first places where when we're diving deeper is with the person who we call them a support provider, which is often their supervisor for clinical work as well at the same time, that we want to talk to them about, so, that's what you were seeing when you were regularly visiting. I mean, people understand it. There's the results they've got across 15 rubrics. Do you recognise that when you're seeing them teach? And very often we find that it's a confirming piece that they really didn't ever get the assessment process in their own classroom. And so, so you've got, sometimes we get conflict in data, of course, as well. But I think that those people have a lot to offer for improving the way we do things. The people who are seeing them 12 times a year, in their classroom actually teaching. This is a performance, this is an assessment of their teaching. And I think that if we're trying to get data, then we need the one who's seen them teach, which is it could be a mentor teacher, but that's hard because getting them involved in the process is complicated, but it could certainly be the university supervisor.
I think that's also critical. Who's involved in the process is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the recommendations, and there are some of them that we've covered now. If you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down, 1.05, revise Common Standard 4 to stipulate the types of data programs must analyze. In other words, TPA scores disaggregated by program pathways, candidate demographics, etc. Scores on formative TPA assessments. So maybe we want to put that language in. So I think we've covered that. But one piece of data we haven't covered that keeps coming up in our conversations is condition codes.
Yeah.
Yes. If someone gets a condition code, is that identified as a no pass, or is that
No pass.
a separate category?
It's
It's
not a
It's
fail.
called a non-scorable.
Non-scorable.
And so something that we've seen is that Pearson eliminates those as attempts, which changes the denominator to look better for the program, but doesn't account for the student's experience, the candidate's experience of needing to resubmit and having what feels like a not pass.
But they don't have to resubmit if they've scored high enough within that task to discount that score for that particular rubric. Right, so on passing score, you could have at least
Well, no, if
one.
you had a condition code, then you wouldn't pass anything.
Well,
There may be instances where that happens, but we see a lot of the entire submission is considered non-scorable because of the certain condition codes.
And I think we're noticing that there are some programs whose candidates have more condition codes than others. And part of the condition code piece is procedural. And the programs that I believe, and I could be wrong, but the programs that are supporting their candidates well in just how do you upload this correctly and how do you make sure you have everything in this section that needs to be here, those candidates are going to be less prone to condition codes than others are. Am I interpreting that correctly?
So are we making another recommendation
I think it might be a subcategory of this with condition codes, maybe just calling it out as something that at this moment in time is really important to address.
But hearing you say that, Tina, also makes me realize, so we haven't been specific about the data we're talking about in our current language here. So do we want to say pass and no pass data, for example? I mean, because right now, the way we have it, I could be interpreted as we just look at our passing data.
Right. I think we do.
When you talked about looking at data rubric wise, that's
Yeah.
why that's important. Because if you've got a whole load of people getting one on one of the rubrics, but still passing, then,
Yeah.
you know, that's something that you need to look at.
We could do another bullet point under this, which is,
We just clarify by data, we mean
yeah,
passing
Yeah.
and condition code. Yeah.
And scores on different tasks, I think.
And do you mean
Mhm.
time and
And first time, and how many times does it take them to pass?
Okay, I just need to jot these down. So pass, no pass, rubric score, completion code,
The number of
attempts.
number of attempts.
And maybe there are some, as Matt was saying in the beginning, that there's some data programs can choose to look at, or Talia and Matt, you were both saying this, to look at based on what makes sense for your program, but there are some data that for accreditation purposes, we want programs to be sure to include and do an analysis of for their plans. And that would include condition codes, number of attempts, both passing and non-passing, and rubric scores. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So what you just wrote, Juliet, those are the data that we recommend are required data for analysis in a continuous improvement plan.
I don't think. So you're taking this out, right? Because we have.
I think it's okay to leave that in the disaggregated part. I don't know. What do y'all? I think that's for the moment. Let's just keep it
Sure.
big. Then I think before our time runs out, we should look at the bucket of how to ensure teacher educators know the assessment. And by teacher educators, as Colin was saying earlier, you know, I mean, the ideal would be everybody who is engaged with supporting candidates learn how to teach in a program. And that includes district
Yep.
level, mentor teachers.
Involved in supporting candidates in their development as teachers.
This county, who does, do you do county PA?
No.
No.
Well, yeah, we do have our single subject English they piloted it because it was free. And I don't know if they.
But does county PA have like brochure type stuff to send to principals and mentor teachers and things like that?
I think they do,
ATPA
but I don't
does.
know.
Okay. I mean, it's like a guide, a guide for what you can do and how you can help and what you
I
can't.
believe they do. I believe
Okay.
they have all that. I mean, I just don't work with it every day.
Right. But whether everyone sends it to those schools.
Right.
sends
We
it-
actually look at it.
Yeah.
Whether.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have noticed in our standards and in the data that Cheryl's team provided for us around accreditation, that great chart, that we could probably tighten up the language about what it means to learn what the TPA is and who needs to learn that and how they need to learn that and what they need to learn about it.
That covered by the other group, improving candidate support, Tina.
Sorry, say it again, Colin?
The group's looking at improving candidate support. Is it under that one?
Or is it even in?
Yeah.
Is it-
Sorry, who?
About 5 minutes out.
You're doing an excellent job, timekeeping.
Yeah.
I just want to say that. Oh.
In the
Can you send her a note?
Yeah.
improved communication across segments within the field, it's revised PS5 to include providing mentor teachers with information about
Yeah.
EPA tasks, rubrics, and scoring.
Right. And I think we need a little more specific recommendations than provide them with information. But again, we have to tread lightly somewhat. But
That's the other group, I think. It's all, different groups are continuous improvement, right? That's the problem
Yeah.
that raises, is that all the other groups, that's the point of having them, is to try and improve what people are doing. So
Right.
ours is an overarching task, isn't it? But we could add something about that, and if they haven't got it, then we have. So I'm all in favour of putting it there, and then if it's replicated by the other group, it doesn't matter.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So do we want to specify what we want then?
I think we can, because if it goes somewhere else, it can go somewhere else. But the more brains put to this task, I think the better. So in the recommendations here, one of them is, I'm just looking at, programs must engage course and clinical factory and a light score training developed by TPA sponsor that will help them understand how evidence is scored via rubrics.
That's the seventh one down. I was just going to mention that one. I think
I
that's
saw that one.
a really important one that I think some places probably don't do.
I was surprised to see
And
there
it's
were
like,
people who opposed that.
yeah, I didn't understand how anyone could oppose that. There must be things, there's something that I can't. Or thinking of it in a different way.
Like maybe light is not enough.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
I think that can be part of what we're recommending about looking deeper into candidate data too.
I think that's a fair question, though. Why? I mean, we're assuming that it should be, but it doesn't seem like that's the consensus. There's not. I mean, there's a third that has strong support, but there's it's not similar to a lot of the other ideas. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be the skeptic here. Why?
That's a good question.
Do Do you think some people question whether every faculty member needs to be involved? Like if they're teaching a course that has, I don't know, has no intersection, I can't imagine what it is.
What would that be though?
You know, I don't know, or, you know, that's what I'm trying to figure that out. like-
So maybe I'm just kind of spitballing here. Isn't the assumption though that if you adhere to and teach the TPEs with fidelity, then the TPA is going to take care of itself?
Yep.
So if I understand the TPEs, then I shouldn't really have to have a solid, if I'm an instructor of one class, and I'm whatever TPEs are a part of that course, I'm all over. I don't know why I have to be trained on scoring.
And then I'll play devil's advocate here, Matt, and say that way back when we were first creating the standards, SB 2042, everybody having an understanding of standards is really different than looking at actual evidence of a standard and saying, yes, this meets that standard for these reasons. And people can have really different understandings of what evidence meets a standard.
I mean, I would say that's left up to then the educators, right? Like
I think there's evidence you can provide, but I think at its core, if you're looking at, I don't know, supporting language, whether I'm demonstrating it in a video or in a lesson plan or something else, I think that would come through.
Yes, but let's say you and I are both looking at the same video of a candidate doing something with respect to teaching language, and I think they're not doing something and you think they are.
Okay, so I guess how would that okay, so we're interpreting the TPE differently then, is what you're saying.
Right.
And the TPA is what's going to help calibrate the TPE for everyone.
Well, you're interpreting the evidence differently.
Yeah,
It might
I
be-
think that's right. The extent to which the evidence
Yeah, means that.
demonstrating that the candidates have met that particular TPE.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm just coming here for the time check, seeing how progress is going and.
But speak to our time person, please.
We are meeting, what do you think?
10 minutes,
10 or maybe even 15?
15,
Yeah.
can we?
I am not. I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm not seriously committed to not putting anything down. I am curious to know why though.
Right, I know.
Really, my point was, it's interesting that there wasn't a strong support.
I know that's what you were doing. And I think it's a really good process to talk through to understand why that is.
At first, I think some comments. I'm glad you brought it up because now I'm thinking about it a little bit more because
Me too.
I am thinking about it more. Because I'm thinking, okay, well now that the TPA is really well, I mean, is it serving to just kind of is it siloing our are we teaching the test? Right.
But that's when we first started this, way back when, that was what a number of faculty and staff would say, and instructors were saying is, I'm not going to teach to any test.
Yeah.
And then they were convinced by our place, by Linda Darling-Hammond herself, that it is a valid test.
Yeah.
Now you're not teaching to it, you're actually teaching to good teaching. And so that was a position where the test is being brought into pretty serious contention as to whether it's a valid test and to what extent it's valid. But I still think that whatever we end up with, I think it goes too far by saying scoring and all of that. But I think that an understanding if whoever you are in our program, if you don't understand the importance of their TPA, then you're not supporting our students very well in your course or your mentoring or your curriculum or all of those things, because it is an important piece of the puzzle that we have at the moment. And we want all of our instructors not to build their course around it, but to at least understand what the demands are within that performance assessment.
The question is, do you get as strong of an understanding without engaging in the scoring?
Right. Do you really know why a candidate is scoring a 2? What in their work is showing that it's a 2, not a 3? And I don't know how it's important to understand
I
one
think.
part of your practice. Sorry. Yeah, sorry, go.
No, sorry, I'm interrupting.
Talia has her hand up too.
Talia.
Oh yeah, just on that one, I thought about this one a little bit when I was ranking it, and I thought about it as like what I get asked to do a lot is like how I think that I'm being clear with my objective, right? And I think that my students get it, but it's the reminder of like if you're doing the TPEs, is that clear to the candidate? Because I'll be honest, when I was a student candidate, I did nothing but the TPEs. I remember the TPEs. I don't remember the TPAs. Does that make
Right.
sense? Everything was TPE and it was clear, and the documents that I use, I understood which TPE I was using. And then what my program did was allow me to transfer and connect the TPEs to whatever the TPAs was asking me to do. And that was really clear. I remember it being super clear. And so now that I work with induction candidates, depending on their program, some of them are like, what's a TPE? So it wasn't clear to them that their coursework was doing a TPE. So I don't know if it's just a matter of like the training is needed for folks to remember to be clear, because I'm assuming they're doing it, they're embedding it. That's like the whole point, right, of the teacher ed program. But maybe it's not clear. I don't know if that could be something where it's like, is it clear? I think we talk about embedding a lot, and that can be different for folks. And then the other one would be like, is it just possible for there to be something where it's a production for the candidate, like a brochure or something where it's like these TPEs align with these TPAs, right? Without it being so like teaching to the test, but it is still honest to the candidates that they are doing the work that is going to satisfy the TPAs, and that's clear for them. Because again, in my program, I felt like it was super clear about the TPEs. And then it was just a matter of transferring that to the TPA language or whatever it was. I don't know if that's what it meant by this in terms of training or in terms of like review or in terms of making sure that folks are reminded that they need to be clear about what TPEs are doing or something. I don't know.
I think that's a really good point, and it's important to make those connections explicit. And I guess that also maybe score training is not the right word. I just remember when the TPAs first came about and our program was trying to learn what they were and understand whether our candidates would do well or not. All the faculty looked at the tasks, we read through the tasks, we read through the rubrics, and we all said, no problem, our candidates are going to do fine. And then we delved deeper when they in their beginning work and we looked at their candidate work and then we looked back at the rubrics and we said, wait a minute, actually they're not doing so great. And it wasn't even just that the rubrics maybe were doing something that we did or did not agree with, or we did or did not teach. It was that we were actually seeing in candidate work less than what we wanted to see. But anyways, it was looking at the candidate work vis-a-vis the rubrics that helped us understand a little bit better what the candidates were doing.
Yeah, I found exactly the same, Tina. And most staff and faculty, when we've led workshops around that understanding, which often are about scoring and, not whether is it a 1, is it a 2/3, is it a 4/5 or whatever it is. But they said that was the most engaging work that they've had, is looking at our candidates' work, rescoring it, looking at the criteria for it, And it was some of the most enjoyable and thoughtful
Yeah.
processes they've had since they would become instructors or members of faculty.
Yeah, that's I think what's important. And I think some programs do that, and some members of programs get to do that, but not all programs do that, and not all teacher educators engaged with candidates get to do that.
You're right. So I'm happy to have something there. I mean, but I don't think it should be trained as, it sounds like you're training to be a scorer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's
Right, and I don't think that's what
a supporter,
we want.
you know.
So maybe it's engaging course and clinical faculty in using the, and it gets back to local.
Student work.
Using their candidates or using the rubrics to score.
Or to analyze.
Like, yeah.
To score.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that get back to the same point that Tina was saying earlier? I might look at it and you say this is a 5, and Tina might look.
The conversation.
That's the conversation.
Right. It's the conversation that's important.
Then that has to be good, because training, I'm envisioning a training like we all get those mandated trainings every year where we stare at a computer. There's no.
Exactly. It's not that. So maybe that's the problem, Matt. Maybe that's what people are seeing, because I think that's a travesty that's all SCORE training is looking at a computer.
The important part is being in conversation and actually.
Yeah.
Like that's important because that's what happens for the calibration for the scoring.
Right.
This isn't about calibrating.
This is
Can it be
about-
like a reflection or like a mock assessment for reflection? For like
Yeah.
programmatic reflection?
Yeah, it is like a programmatic reflection. That's certainly the way we would see it, I think.
I like the term, well, I like conversation, in collaboration. I like, now it was another C word. What was the other C word? Calibration. There's some sort of calibration. It's an analysis of student work using the rubrics in collaboration. Sorry, Juliet, we're not making your job very easy.
It's my computer that's not working and I can't get the document to work. So I'm just gonna write things down by hand and then put it in. So. Collegial and collaborative analysis of student work.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's the idea that like the assumption is not that we're trying to get on board with some external thing, but it's like it's our expertise, right? And
I'm
yeah.
not against it. I'm envisioning how that's going to get. Lots of different programs.
No.
And I guess I'm just thinking, I mean, some of the things we're talking about seem pretty obvious and straightforward, and we're not even needing these additional explanations.
Right.
But here we are needing to do that because there's plenty of programs out there clearly that are doing things very differently. Some don't even know how many pathways or programs they have in there.
Right.
So if we just have legal or whatever those C words are, I don't know.
I mean, I think what this group is for. This is for accreditation.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And if I'm going to, I want to see some mutual collaborative understanding of the teacher performance assessment and its demands.
Right.
And I want to be able to see ways that you achieve that across your staff and faculty in this institution. But I think framing them on words like that, you're right, Matt, is going to like set off alarms for people. And it's not what I want to see if I'm coming into accredited institution. I want to see that they're on the same page, that they're collegially working on their understanding of the demands of of a TPA and how to support that within their coursework or their clinical experience. I mean, I think that's what it's about. Now, lots of institutions, personally, I think the only way to do that is to actually get them all together, everyone who's teaching it and working with the students, and do some scoring and like go through the rubrics and get out student work from last year and all of that sort of stuff. But I don't think we don't have to do that, and they won't in massive programs.
So, where does that leave us?
Well,
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, when did you say we got to go back?
4:30.
Yeah.
Oh, 4:30 now?
yeah.
Oh, cup of tea time.
So I don't know, Matt, I really appreciate what you're saying, and I don't know if we just sort of throw out some language at this point. I mean, it is the very beginning stage and see what other people say, or if we try to tighten this up better, or what are you thinking?
On me, I think kind of maybe to build on or maybe just reiterate what Colin was saying, I think really what we just want is evidence that that well, on the one hand, evidence that this program, there's evidence of the analysis we have in our first bullet or our first recommendation is actually leading to change, whether that means changes in assignments or syllabi or observation tools or something else. And then maybe evidence of, I don't know if this is not going to come out right, but evidence of faculty having maybe a deeper or better understanding of trying to avoid using yeah, sure, the demands of
The landscape, I mean, honestly, like really, truly, I mean.
yeah, I don't know.
Or is it the rubrics as they apply to their candidates' work?
I mean, that's what we,
I guess what I want to try to strengthen is the practice that programs give mentor teachers and field supervisors a folder that says, here's the TPA, here all the candidates are going to do it, and that's it. I just don't think that's not as helpful to candidates as you all know how many times candidates go, well, is this, where do you think this is going to score? Is this, is this what I need to be doing? Is this a passing, whatever I've created here? Does my lesson plan have everything it needs in it? And, whatever it is.
Can you read us what we have?
Part of me too also just wants to believe that if you focus on good teaching, we don't have to worry about a 4 or a 3. You just have, as instructors or as faculty or whatever the languages that we're talking about here, who are we talking about? Clinical faculty.
And Matt, I actually think that's true for a lot of teacher educators who know their work well and know the TPEs well and know their teaching well. But I think in California, we have thousands of teacher educators with varying levels of expertise. And the performance assessment, especially in collaboration with colleagues, can help them get better at their work. And I think that's what we're talking about here with the continuous improvement. But it has to be in collaboration, and it has to be looking at candidate work, and it has to be doing a real analysis that helps them understand what candidates are doing better.
Well, so if we, one of our other recommendations, I believe, is about local scoring. So we then just require everyone to be trained.
Then we're really going to get a lot of backlash. But yeah, that would absolutely help the process if, if there was, I don't know that programs need to do all the scoring of their own candidates, but I think if they do at least some.
Bring up that category.
Within every 5 years, you're trained on how to score.
But maybe we shouldn't call it score training. I mean, maybe that is the
No.
problematic term.
Back to what you were talking about, Tina, with the first recommendation. What if when you're analyzing the student work, you're doing it through the lens of the TPA rubrics?
Yes. Yes.
So it gets just put back into that first one.
That people would be looking for evidence that courses and supervisors and clinical work is using those measures
Right.
to provide feedback on student work and things like that. Then we're coming into the embedding bit as well,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which is okay.
But I was meaning it more about the first recommendation we said where they were, analyzing data, right? And we said that part of that would be analyzing qualitative data,
Mhm.
like student work.
Student work, yeah.
And so when you're doing that analysis of the student work, could you be using the TPA rubrics?
Well, the TPA rubrics, certainly for NTPA and I think for Cal TPA, are all linked to the TPEs.
Right.
Every single rubric
Yeah. Right.
it's addressed here.
It's
So
TPA.
they're using
Exactly.
the rubrics
Right.
not because of the TPA, but because the rubrics are also a way of measuring, which is how they got recognised in the first place and allowed to be performance assessments in California. Right.
Right.
So it's using the rubrics from the TPEs
Right.
as measures for the TPEs. An understanding of student performance
I
on TPEs.
My point was just if we're trying to familiarize faculty with those rubrics and the tasks, if we're engaging them in analyzing data and we're asking them to use those rubrics to analyze that data, that's a way of helping them to become more familiar with the rubrics if
Yes.
they aren't already.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the intention, I think.
Yeah, that's the intention, I think, too. I'm just trying to think, in an ideal world, you have everyone engage, an opportunity to be involved in that way. As you all know, one of our big problems as a profession of teacher education is that oftentimes the people closest to practice, supervisors, mentor teachers, are the ones who are most peripheral to the core decisions that are made in a teacher education program. They're maybe not the ones that get to sit in the room and look at the data with the other faculty and look at the rubrics and do analyses. And there are a lot of practical reasons for that, why that is, but it sure would help everybody, including the program's improvement, to have them there.
So is that part of it? That when you're engaging in the analysis of the data, it needs to involve
At least a cross section? I don't know. I mean, ideally, I don't really know how far we can go with that requirement, but
You know how difficult it is to get mentor teachers to be able to come to anything at all, and to pay for subs or whatever. It's still hard to get them to come.
Well, and even in ours, 2/3 of our courses are taught by part-time faculty. Many of those are teachers during the day.
Right.
But to find when they can actually talk with the tenure track faculty, because the faculty don't want to come to a meeting in the evening.
Right.
And so trying to
There's a
build.
reason why it's not happening.
Exactly.
Many reasons why it's not
Yeah.
happening. Yeah, right.
and yet I'll just say when we were able to carve that out, and again, the program I worked in was a small program. We were geographically isolated. Most of the mentor teachers in our area were part of our program, but we've found different ways to carve out time. Maybe, and we would have a school site meeting right after school, sit down for 3 hours. And the feedback from mentor teachers was they loved it. They loved the opportunity to engage in those conversations and actually have input to what the program was doing instead of being told all the time, do this, do that. But it's getting very Pollyanna-ish but if there's anyway a better way of having programs accountable for really helping mentor teachers
But
and
at least attempting. I mean,
Agreed.
that's what I would want to see is what attempts have you made?
yeah.
And the attempts are the important thing. We have like a dining discuss once every 6 weeks where we invite them all to come for free dinner. That's it. It's a little come. That's
Right.
right. You know, and it's a third. And it tends to be the same third that come every time. That's our attempt at getting everybody to be on the same page.
Exactly. Our teacher education summits where we
Yeah.
put together
Exactly.
faculty and mentor teachers and district leaders.
Right.
What education I imagine is more about is what attempts you've made. Tell us what you've tried.
Right.
You know, and you know we can see some effects of that, and that's fine. Rather than saying I can't be bothered, you know, they're not going to come because then the red flag goes up, right? Oh, we're not even trying because they won't come.
I like that. I like that because it does seem like it comes down
Did you put your hand
to
to it?
resource. Yeah.
I was gonna say as a mentor teacher, I tend to be more open to. I think one of the best advice I got was like they were like, "Where do you want to teach?" And I was like, "Back home in LA." And they were like, "Well, then go to school in LA because there's no need for you to go to Harvard to be a teacher ed program if you're gonna teach in LA. You got to go to LA." And that was my first, I think, preparation for teaching was like it's very localized, right? So like where you want to teach sometimes matters, and so then you like pull your alumni. So like I'm more open as a mentor teacher to take on student teachers from my program just because I know it and I know the expectations and I know like what's required and they do a vetting process, which again, resources or whatever, as opposed to when I get a random email from a student being like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor teacher. And I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what your program requires. So that's another one because you're talking about mentor teachers, but like afternoons, weekends, I don't know about that, but there is some kind of like if I'm familiar with the program, if I'm familiar with the faculty, with the philosophy, and then we have an ongoing optional 2-hour Zoom drop-in time where we are discussing, programmatic goals and objectives, and that's nice. But I think that my experience from mentoring various pre-service teachers has been varied between the different programs. Some are like, I never hear from them, and some of them are asking me for constant feedback. And I think that does now sway me in terms of who I will take on and who I won't.
So as
Yeah.
chair of the commission for several years, and being on the commission for 15 years, I'm so dismayed, Talia, to hear that you are still getting approached by candidates asking to be a student teacher in your classroom. That should not be happening.
Yeah,
It
I know.
should not be happening. And it is. Those programs are doing a huge disservice to their candidates.
See, and I wouldn't even know that kind of conversation. I talked to my old advisor who I work with, and I found out that not every program does that. And I was shocked because when I started getting emails, I'm like, are there programs not placing them like you placed us? And she was telling me no. And so there's a little bit there, sometimes they just get lost in the transition of emails. Our principal will reach out and say, hey, there's candidates that need placement. And so the hesitation is there because I don't know what I'm stepping into. I don't know what the requirements are. I don't know if I'm going to be asked certain things to do that I'm not aware of, as opposed to maybe tapping into that alumni pool that might exist in your area, because that makes sense.
Terrible position to put you in. I also think that, again, in a perfect world, we're providing mentor teachers with release time, a substitute. And we've tried to do that, or district superintendents who have partnered closely with us see the professional development opportunities and sitting with us and doing a collaborative analysis of teaching. We all get better at our teaching when we do that, even if we're looking at student teacher work. Anyway, I know we're almost out of time. There's one thing I was just looking at these responses that we haven't really addressed that I think is kind of critical for the accreditation piece that we're missing. And that is when it's programs that have consistently low pass rates and or consistently high condition codes for their candidates. Is there something that we need in the accreditation process to strengthen the ability of our accreditation process to put a stop to that or to flag that or to require something different? Or maybe we just put a placeholder because I know we're out of time.
It makes me nervous, that one. It's not what I want that we can do in 2 minutes, I don't think.
No, we can't do it in 2 minutes, but so I was just going to say maybe a note that's just a placeholder.
I think we need to address, I think we need to talk about it. But, you know, what's low and what's a critical number, and it goes back to what I was saying in the meeting. I makes me nervous when everybody's judged on the same sort of number, without context to those numbers, without some understanding of those numbers, and you know, and whether the other thing that we talked about was whether it's going to be public knowledge or not, which totally against in any shape or form. The world we live in today, that everyone wants to get rid of somebody, and that's just an opening to do that. But at the same time, people need to be held accountable when things aren't going well.
Right.
So, but I do think we need to talk about it.
I just want to avoid one of the conversations we've had over and over again, that one of the most distressing things are candidates who are just left on their own to do this. And then when they don't pass, programs often don't even know where they've gone.
No, I agree that's untenable, really.
Yeah, I agree.
But that could also be the case, you know, with in an institution where nearly everyone's passing, but there's 2 or 3 that aren't. I don't know where they are. You know, it doesn't have to be in an institution where there's lots of people not passing, that they're still getting it wrong for some.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And equally, not passing, and they're still working with them, and they're doing their best. So, yeah, it's not complex, you know, that one.
All right. That's the other one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. See you in the main room. Good group.